The immediate protection of Stalin was handled by a unit called Guard Number 1, which was responsible for protecting all heads of state. The protection of other government members and the conduct of mass or one-time security operations fell to Guard Number 2. Naturally, the number of Stalin's bodyguards was greater than that of any other official. At different times, the unit's strength ranged from 400 to 600 people, most of whom held the rank of captain or major. Approximately 200 of them performed guard functions. The rest worked as auxiliary staff, dog handlers, supply and administrative personnel, employees of various military organizations, intelligence service officers, and transport workers serving Stalin's dachas both near Moscow and in the south. Although each facility used by Stalin had its own commandant, who managed security in the leader's absence, upon his arrival, all personnel came under the command of the Chief of Personal Protection. Stalin's children, Vasily and Svetlana, were also provided with guards, nannies, maids, and other necessary staff from the security service. According to veterans, the number of Stalin's immediate bodyguards did not exceed 35 people, working in shifts of 9 or 12 hours, including 2 drivers, 1 primary, 1 backup, riding in the escort vehicle. Bodyguards were forbidden from making personal requests to Stalin. Opinions vary on his attitude toward the guards, ranging from complete indifference to casual human interaction, or even invitations to play chess. An interesting aspect was the use of doubles, people who resembled Stalin physically during security operations. Apart from legends, there is no official information on this, but it was confirmed by Vlasik's daughter, Nadezhda Nikolaevna. Doubles were used. This was practiced especially in situations where one only needed to be present, not speak. I have an artist's eye. As a portraitist, I noticed differences in facial features. My father invented all the tricks for distracting attention. Such methods of substituting the protected person have been known since the Roman Empire. Russian czars also used them. Whether Vlasik came up with the idea himself, read about it, or was advised is unknown. Some believe that actor Semyon Goldshtab, dancer Felix Dadaev, and possibly an accountant known only by surname, played this role episodically. Was Stalin paranoid about assassination attempts? Dozens of studies have not given a definitive answer. On the other hand, a personal security service instills more fear in the protected person than confidence. The psychology kicks in, and after years of protection, the subject becomes afraid to go even to the bathroom alone. Moreover, the heads of security agencies actively fed the leader disinformation about constantly planned attempts and conspiracies in order to strengthen their own positions. A huge influence on public perception of Stalin's alleged fears came from his associates, who after his death tried to blame him for all sins, including their own. Hence the denunciation of the cult of personality, tales of the dictator's eccentricities, and many fabricated stories. Many revelations also came from Stalin's former guards, some of whom never actually saw him alive and only knew him from newspapers. After Stalin's death, Beria dispersed all the bodyguards to the far corners of the country. No memoirs remained from them, whether out of loyalty to the leader, fidelity to their oath, or because none of them survived. At the same time, a number of facts clearly indicate that Stalin had no particular fear. Comparing Hitler's underground bunkers with the glass doors of Stalin's residence makes talk of fear of assassination meaningless. Health protection. As a Caucasian, Stalin disliked the cold, damp climate near Moscow, which aggravated his illnesses. On doctors' recommendations, he periodically underwent treatment at balneological resorts in Nizhnaya Matsesta, treating a chronically ailing left arm with hydrogen sulfide and radon baths. Stalin also suffered from hypertension, chronic joint rheumatism, sciatica, and angina. On the advice of his personal physician Kirillov, he was treated primarily through spa medicine, and only much later began taking medication. Since Stalin chose Crimean and especially Caucasian resorts for treatment, holidays in these regions soon became fashionable among party leaders, and an active construction of state dachas began. The security leadership had to address the challenge of protecting high-ranking persons in all their vacation locations. Particular attention was paid to the food supply for the Kremlin. A large staff of microbiologists and chemists tested samples of everything intended for the top leadership on guinea pigs and other animals. Not a single slice of fruit, bottle of wine, or piece of meat or bread reached Stalin's table until specialists were completely satisfied it was absolutely harmless. There was even a unit whose duty was to sample the very air Stalin breathed. Security at mass events. Providing security at public gatherings is a headache for any protection service. However, the specifics of the Soviet system greatly reduced these difficulties. The circle of people Stalin met was extremely narrow. He never attended mass rallies. He appeared in public only at party congresses. Between 1939 and 1952, there was only one such forum. At sessions of the Supreme Soviet, and at the annual May Day and November 7th celebrations on Red Square. And even at the latter two, he did not always appear. Realistically, the leader had to be protected only in the Kremlin, at his suburban dachas, and during his annual trips south. Stalin never stayed in public places like hotels, never participated in election campaigns, never visited churches or sporting events, rarely visited relatives or friends, never held press conferences, and never broadcast on radio. His walks were confined to the Kremlin or the forests around his dachas. Even his occasional appearances on Red Square posed no threat. When Stalin stood on the Lenin Mausoleum tribune, every right flanker in the marching column, whether workers, athletes, youth, or military, was in fact a state security officer. On the lower tiers of the mausoleum, hidden behind shields, stood heavy machine guns at the ready, in addition to those on the Kremlin walls. Snipers occupied rooftops and buildings adjacent to Red Square. On the tribune, next to Stalin, stood his bodyguards dressed in officers' uniforms, indistinguishable from ordinary military personnel. For official events at the Kremlin, party congresses or Supreme Soviet sessions, the building and adjacent structures were inspected thoroughly from basement to roof several days in advance, then placed under round-the-clock guard. Attendance was strictly by pre-approved and vetted lists. Stalin's visits to the theater, he went almost exclusively to the Bolshoi, also followed a special procedure. He had a private box. Adjacent boxes were occupied by security or associates. Stalin arrived at the start of the performance, or the performance began when he arrived. In either case, the theater exits were blocked. Stalin left while the audience was still in the hall. He did not attend concerts. His favorite performers were invited to his dacha, or the Kremlin, instead. Security at dachas. During his time in power, Stalin used approximately 15 state dachas. Apart from the dacha at Volinskoye, known as the nearest dacha, the others were used only occasionally, mainly during vacations. The average floor space of the dachas was around 200 to 300 square meters. Only the nearest dacha had 1,000 square meters. A state dacha was nothing like the ordinary conception of one. By Soviet standards, it was a billionaire's residence with every conceivable infrastructure, situated on a vast territory in a forest or park. The dachas typically had enclosed grounds of 50 to 100 hectares, surrounded by several types of barriers. An inner wooden fence 3 to 6 meters high, an outer decorative fence with metal railings, and rows of barbed wire or camouflage wire barriers. The outer perimeter, beginning several kilometers before the mansion, was guarded by NKVD, later MGB units. The inner perimeter and patrols, often with dogs, were the responsibility of the personal guard, while bodyguards protected the interior of the buildings. The dacha's airspace was closed to flights and guarded by fighter aircraft. Anti-aircraft units maintained a watch along a perimeter of many kilometers around the dacha. The nearest dacha alone was protected by approximately 100 people. During the war, several anti-aircraft gun emplacements were set up on its grounds against possible German paratroop landings. The dacha complex included guest houses for associates who stayed overnight, quarters for guards and support staff, maids, a barber, a cook, waiters, a nurse, drivers, gardeners, and janitors, as well as technical facilities, a garage, kitchen dining hall, boiler room, and water tower with a well. An average dacha was serviced by around 50 people. All dachas had both open and encrypted telephone lines. Roads and power lines were built by a specially created paramilitary construction directorate. Furniture was made at a dedicated factory near Moscow. All dachas shared a conservative aesthetic: small workrooms, similar interiors. Critics attributed this to Stalin's alleged fear of large spaces, admirers to his disdain for luxury. Yet all dachas also featured large combined dining halls. Stalin disliked eating alone. Notably, kitchen facilities were located in separate outbuildings, so cooking smells would not disturb those resting. Every dacha staff included a toxicologist with a laboratory for testing food for poisons. All windows in Stalin's rooms were kept permanently curtained, a security measure ensuring no one outside could determine which room he occupied. Lights in the dining rooms and offices were always on. Stalin left for the Kremlin once a day, between 5 and 6 p.m., and worked until 10 or 11 p.m. or later, often well past midnight. Sometimes, after watching a film, he returned to the dacha and hosted a late supper, which he called dinner, inviting friends and party associates, at which state matters were often discussed. He went to bed at 3 to 4 a.m. and rose between 10 and 11 a.m. Stalin disliked having bodyguards close by inside the dacha. From 10 a.m., duty aides, assistant commandants, a housekeeper, a cook, a gardener, a duty librarian, and others from whom Stalin might need something were present on the premises. During the war, Stalin worked more at the dacha, which became a branch of the general headquarters. General staff officers often reported on the front situation there. A notable feature of Stalin's dachas was that they were the only places where the leader met with women. The fact that Stalin did not stray onto foreign territory greatly simplified the work of the guard. Apart from the trip to the dacha, they had nothing else to worry about. In the early years, while his wife was still alive, secret romances with well-known actresses took place at the Moscow area dachas. It was said his mistresses included ballerinas Olga Lepeshinskaya and Marina Semyonova, while among singers, he particularly favored Natalia Shpiler and Valeria Barsova. His longest relationship was reportedly with Bolshoi theater soloist Vera Davidova, described in journalist Leonid Gendlin's book, Confession of Stalin's Mistress, though the singer's relatives still deny the account. Stalin's last companion was Valentina Istomina, who from 1935 to 1953 served as his housekeeper, managing the household, setting the table, and handling domestic matters for the widower. Svetlana Alliluyeva wrote in her book, 20 Letters to a Friend. New faces appeared, including a young snub-nosed Velechka, whose cheerful laughter never stopped. After working in Moscow for about 3 years, she was transferred to Stalin's dacha at Kuntsevo and remained there until his death, becoming so close to him that he trusted only her to serve his food and medicine. Rumors that Istomina was the leader's mistress were reportedly confirmed in private conversations by Vyacheslav Molotov. After Stalin's death, she was given a personal pension. She raised a nephew whose father died at the front and died in 1995, never having told anyone her story. Travel security. By train. Due to a Politburo ban on air travel, Stalin traveled mainly by special train, known by the Russian tradition as a Literny, priority train. While in motion, the Literny train held the highest movement priority. All other trains adjusted their schedules accordingly. The train included special salon cars and armored carriages, some dating back to Tsarist times. In 1943, ahead of the Tehran Conference, several new specially built half-armored salon cars were constructed. The composition and movement procedure for the Literny train was as follows. Travel was exclusively at night. 3 locomotives were used. One traveled alone as a control, departing 10 minutes ahead. The Literny train followed, pulled by 2 locomotives. Oncoming freight trains were halted. No train ahead of the Literny was dispatched. Trains behind could only depart after the Literny had cleared the next station. The lead locomotive cabin carried an instructor driver, 2 drivers, and a security officer. The second locomotive had 2 drivers. A direct telephone line connected the lead locomotive to the train's command car. After the second locomotive came 3 or 4 ordinary cover cars, followed by the special government car, externally indistinguishable from a regular carriage. All security personnel were in position 3 hours before departure. All tracks were checked not only by railway workers, but by security representatives. All stations along the route were thoroughly inspected. This same procedure remains in use to this day. Stories about armored trains, 3 simultaneous trains running in parallel, special flat cars, and so forth are, according to veterans, nothing more than the fantasies of researchers. By air, there is a widespread belief that Stalin feared flying, based on the absence of references to his air travel in open sources. For many years after his death, only one flight was mentioned in memoirs, to Tehran and back for the meeting with Churchill and Roosevelt. In fact, the reason Stalin rarely flew was a Politburo resolution banning the use of aircraft by officials from department head up to Central Committee members. This arose not from fear of flying, but from the frequent accidents involving Soviet aircraft in which entire commissariats, leadership, or design bureau chiefs perished. For the Tehran trip, Stalin flew in an American Douglas C-47, escorted by American fighters. A dedicated aviation unit, the 2nd Special Purpose Air Division, served government flights. In addition to transporting government members, marshals, and generals, the division carried out Supreme Command assignments, relocating Air Force units, dropping paratroops, supplying partisans, and transporting cargo. Its aircraft supported the Tehran and Yalta conferences and flew Moscow to San Francisco routes for UN conference delegates. The division was commanded from October 1942 by Grachiov, later a major general and hero of the Soviet Union. Its core aircraft were twin-engine military transports and C-47s, with specially converted luxury saloon variants for government passengers. Stalin's C-47 was personally piloted by Grachiov, who had nearly 500 combat sorties to his name. Government flights were escorted by fighter aircraft. Stalin's Tehran flight was protected by 2 squadrons of 24 fighters. By car, Stalin's first official vehicle appeared in 1917 when he was People's Commissar for Nationalities. A 6-cylinder, 30 horsepower, 1914 British car, originally custom-ordered for the mother of Emperor Nicholas II. It was luxurious, but slow, which dissatisfied Stalin. During the Civil War, he was given a powerful 12-cylinder American automobile, capable of 130 kilometers per hour, originally purchased by the Tsarist government for military use. He found this speed and power combination to his liking. Back in Moscow, Stalin obtained a similar car, but was soon moved to a Rolls-Royce, as it was decided all government vehicles should be uniform, long, spacious, 75-horsepower machines of excellent reliability. The Bolsheviks purchased 73 such cars from England. Czech writer Hofmeister recalled being astonished by the sight of so many Rolls-Royces assembled on the Moscow riverbank one evening. Stalin never fully warmed to the British car, and after Lenin's death, he arranged to purchase American automobiles. From 1925, Packards, Lincolns, Cadillacs, and Buicks began arriving in the country. Stalin switched to a Packard 533, then in 1933 to a Packard Twin 6 with a 12-cylinder engine, with an open-body model coming into his possession. In October 1935, U.S. Ambassador Averell Harriman presented Stalin with a gift from President Roosevelt: an armored Packard limousine. This was not merely a luxury car. It was the most technically advanced model available, with a 7-seat body. Since it was white, it was repainted in the standard government black. It was equipped with a 12-cylinder, 8.2-liter, 155-horsepower engine. Fully loaded, it weighed 6 tons, with each door weighing 350 kilograms. It could reach 130 kilometers per hour. Stalin did not part with this car, using it for dozens of trips including the Tehran, Yalta, and Potsdam conferences, and from its windows surveyed the ruins of Berlin in 1945. In 1947, the Stalin automobile plant, ZIS, produced a series of armored 6-seat limousines designated ZIS-115, for which Stalin personally set the design specifications. The prototype was the 1941 Packard 180. The vehicle weighed over 6 tons, had reinforced suspension, an engine boosted from 140 to 162 horsepower, a top speed just over 100 kilometers per hour, and was equipped with air conditioning and luxurious upholstery, fabric seats, leather front seat. The armor provided reliable protection against automatic and machine gun fire and grenade and mine fragments. Production was classified. Only 32 limousines were ever built. Stalin used the ZIS-115 as his primary vehicle, but never gave up his beloved Packard. All 32 ZIS-115s were distributed between his various residences, 2 in Leningrad, about 10 in Moscow and the suburban dachas, and others in Crimea, the Northern Caucasus, Sochi, and Georgia. All government vehicles, including Stalin's, were kept at the Special Purpose Garage under the Central Committee administration. The garage was managed from 1,925 to 1,953 by Stalin's personal driver, Udalov. An escort security vehicle first appeared behind Stalin's car in 1,932, carrying 3 or 4 men. Once Stalin began using armored cars, he sat on a folding seat called a strapontin. According to Vlasic, the chief of Stalin's security, this arrangement was explained as follows: a bullet from the front, that's for you, Vlasic. A bullet from the rear, that's for the guests or the guard. Comrade Stalin and Comrade Beria may still be of use to the party. Stalin always anticipated attack while the car was moving, specifically at corners where the vehicle had to slow down. During trips, 3 cars were always used: lead, main, and trailing. The deputy chief of the guard and several officers rode in the lead car. Stalin rode in the main car, with Vlasic or another senior security officer in the front passenger seat. The trailing car carried armed officers with pistols and submachine guns, and a spare driver for Stalin's vehicle. Once a second identical main car was introduced to the motorcade, the 2 cars would swap positions during the journey, making it impossible to identify which one carried the leader. Another concealment technique devised by Vlasic involved 2 identical composition motorcades dispatched along different routes simultaneously. Even the escorts did not know which one carried Stalin, let alone any potential attacker. The motorcade traveled at 50 to 60 kilometers per hour. Roads were not fully blocked, but traffic lights showed a constant yellow in all directions. At intersections without lights, traffic policemen managed crossings. The cars were also fitted with a special signal that prompted traffic officers to grant them priority. Roads Stalin used regularly were not only kept under surveillance, but permanently guarded. Residents in buildings overlooking the routes were either law enforcement officers or vetted individuals. Commercial and industrial premises along the routes were staffed by undercover officers, shopkeepers, janitors, and so on. On busy streets and squares, plainclothes traffic police ensured no one could access the carriageway. In total, the road from the Kremlin to the nearest dacha was protected by up to 1,500 people. For reference, today, a ZIS 115 starts at €8 million at auction. By boat, the two-deck passenger motor vessel Maxim Gorky, also called Stalin's yacht, was built in 1934 at the Krasnoye Sormovo shipyard. Displacement, 605 tons. Length, 68.8 meters. Width, 13 meters. Draft, 1.3 meters. Height with masts raised, 12 meters. Speed, 30 kilometers per hour. The vessel could accommodate approximately 100 passengers with a crew of 19. Its hull and power plant were repurposed from a Decabrist-class submarine. The vessel featured banquet and music salons, a solarium, and 3 first-class staterooms, each with a bedroom, study, and full bathroom. Over 17 species of wood were used in the interiors, including mahogany, chinar, and Karelian birch, with all furniture and fittings made to individual designs. There is a persistent belief that Stalin never vacationed on the boat. However, many sources indicate he sometimes used it on trips south, traveling by train to Gorky, then by river to Stalingrad, then by train again to the Caucasus. The absence of detailed information is explained by the vessel and crew being under NKVD jurisdiction, and what went on inside that organization remains largely secret to this day. Security on board was carried out in the standard fashion, with river police patrol boats accompanying the vessel throughout its journey. The vessel survived the war camouflaged in Kuibyshev. After Stalin's death, it was used by Beria, Kaganovich, Mikoyan, Molotov, Malenkov, and Khrushchev. In the 1960s, it hosted foreign delegations and creative groups. In the early 2000s, the ship was modernized and its furniture restored. A museum cabin with wax figures of Stalin and other Soviet leaders was opened on board. From 2003, the Maxim Gorky operated in Moscow, available for charter excursions on the Moscow River and surrounding waterways, and from 2014 has functioned exclusively as a floating restaurant. The total personnel strength of the main Guard Directorate was a state secret, classified not to hide it from enemies, who could roughly calculate it anyway, but from the Soviet public, lest unreliable elements speculate about the enormous expense of maintaining the leadership. In 1,943 alone, the operational staff of the Guard Directorate numbered more than 1,500 people. From 1,936, the guarding and round-the-clock patrolling of the Kremlin was carried out by the NKVD Special Purpose Regiment, informally nicknamed the Kremlin Regiment, comprising 1,200 officers and soldiers. The Directorate's agent network working in establishments Stalin frequently visited numbered around 16,000 officers and enlisted personnel, both men and women, in Moscow alone. Beyond the capital, Directorate personnel guarded numerous dachas, rest houses, and sanatoriums for the top leadership across the country. Up to 100 such facilities directly assigned to Stalin. The Directorate also covered the staff of special trains, the carpool, and even the crew of the Volga riverboat. Directly subordinate to the Directorate were the 1st Dzerzhinsky Division and the 2nd Internal Troops Division, each numbering 10,000 to 12,000 personnel. These were not combat divisions, but units staffed and structured for special security operations, officially described to the public as maintaining public order. In exceptional circumstances, the Guard Directorate Chief could call upon army units. For this purpose, the Kantemirovskaya Tank Division was stationed near Moscow from September 1945. Thus, in the period 1947 to 1953, the total number of personnel engaged in one way or another in protecting the government, and Stalin reached approximately 50,000 people. Selection of personnel. Selection was extremely rigorous. To be accepted into the Guard required recommendations from party and Komsomol bodies. Preference was given to those who had completed compulsory military service, particularly from NKVD border units. Officers were sometimes recruited on the recommendation of the Central Committee or senior security ministers. Requirements were extremely strict. Excellent health, impeccable personal history. No relatives abroad, party or Komsomol membership. Non-members were accepted only for specialized technical roles with no contact with the leader. No relatives who had lived abroad for any length of time, with no exceptions, even for relatives of senior officials. Selection was also conducted along ethnic lines. In the 1930s, there were many Ukrainians in the Guard. After the war, this changed sharply. Since many Ukrainians had lived in occupied territories during the war, they were virtually excluded from the security service with no exceptions made. Every candidate was thoroughly vetted over an extended period, kept under surveillance, and had their entire circle of acquaintances and relatives investigated. Any compromising information led to immediate rejection without explanation. The same scrutiny continued throughout the candidates' training at the Guard School, which all were required to complete regardless of military rank or previous position. Service in the Guard was extremely sought after, but also extremely demanding. Accordingly, 1 year of service in personal protection was counted as 3 years, equivalent to frontline service. For other security service personnel, Guard service counted as 2 years. Pay was substantially higher than military salaries. Uniforms were made to individual order from high-quality materials. Several sets of civilian clothing were also issued annually. A particular feature of recruitment: unmarried men, or those with Moscow-born wives, were strongly preferred. Bachelors could be housed in dormitories. Those with local wives already had accommodation. Moscow natives were also easier to vet for reliability. One might expect numerous attempts on the life of such a heavily guarded man. Researchers document 8 assassination attempts on Stalin, 2 of which are believed to have been staged with Stalin's own sanction, plus 5 incidents that could have ended fatally. The failure to provide timely medical assistance when Stalin lost consciousness on March 1, 1953, whether from a stroke or poisoning, may also be considered a form of assassination by neglect. The guards waited for authorization from Presidium members before entering. Doctors were summoned only with great delay. The incidents in detail. November 1931, a white officer named Ogarev, recruited by British intelligence, planned to shoot Stalin during his walk through central Moscow. The attempt cannot be considered a genuine threat, since the would-be assassin was under constant Cheka surveillance. The security service nonetheless received credit for uncovering it. August 26, 1931. Stalin's car collided with a truck driven by a drunk driver in Sochi. Neither Stalin nor Voroshilov, who was with him, was injured. September 23, 1931. While vacationing at the cold river Dacha near Gagra, Stalin set off by motorboat for a sea excursion to Cape Pitsunda. On the return journey, the boat was fired on from shore. The shots missed, and no one was hurt. It turned out that a border post had not been informed of the government vessel's delayed return due to bad weather. The border unit commander, Lavrov, had fired 3 warning shots at the unidentified vessel. 1933. In Georgia, Stalin narrowly escaped death when a bomb planted under a bridge was triggered. According to the account, he was saved by Lavrenti Beria's advice to switch to another car. The vehicle that would have carried him exploded, crossing the bridge and fell into a ravine. Researchers generally view this as a provocation staged by the cunning Beria to earn favor with the leader. January 1935. A young woman of the Orlov-Pavlovsk noble family allegedly fired at Stalin in the Kremlin library, but missed. She was arrested and soon executed. The case files have never been found. The incident reportedly led to a review of Kremlin commandant staff, which uncovered the so-called Kremlin affair, or ball of yarn case, leading to accusations of treason against a number of Kremlin employees, including Kamenev, Peterson, Yanukidze, and others identified as Trotskyists and political opponents. The incident and the case are widely considered fabricated. The files remain classified. 1935. During a visit to the city of Gori in Georgia, a plot by veteran Georgian Bolsheviks who believed Stalin had betrayed Lenin's cause was reportedly uncovered. Researchers are divided. Some believe the conspiracy was genuine. Others view it as a pretext for purging opposition in Georgia. May 18, 1935. The aircraft ANT-20 Maxim Gorky collided in the air with an I-5 fighter piloted by Blagin. Both aircraft crashed, killing all aboard. In the USSR, the accident was attributed to negligence. However, a version exists that it was an assassination attempt, as there were rumors that Stalin, Molotov, Kaganovich, or Dzhonikidze, and others were to fly in that aircraft. In September of the same year, a Warsaw newspaper published what claimed to be Blagin's statement that he intended to ram the aircraft deliberately as his contribution to fighting Bolshevism. March 11, 1938, a document discovered in French special archives reported that Lieutenant Danilov of the Tula garrison, disguised in GPU officer's uniform and carrying forged documents, entered the Kremlin and attempted to kill Stalin during a walk. Under interrogation, Danilov stated he belonged to a secret terrorist organization and wished to avenge Marshal Tukhachevsky, who had been executed. Operation Bear, late 1930s. A covert operation prepared with the participation of Genrikh Lushkov, chief of the Far Eastern NKVD Directorate, who defected to Japan in 1938, aimed to kill Stalin at one of his southern dachas. 6 white guards from the Union of Russian Patriots were to carry it out. In early 1939, during their crossing of the Soviet-Turkish border, the group was fired upon. 3 were killed. The rest fled. A Soviet agent codenamed Liu, working in Manchuria, had informed Soviet intelligence of the plan. A Japanese book, Japanese Plans to Assassinate Stalin, was later published on these operations. Second Japanese attempt, 1939. Terrorists planned to bring a time bomb into Lenin's mausoleum to explode on the morning of May 1st, killing the Soviet leadership on the Tribune. Again, the NKVD was forewarned, apparently by the same source. November 6, 1942. Deserter Savely Dmitriev, hiding at the Lobnoye Mesto on Red Square, opened fire on a government motorcade emerging from the Spassky Gate. After several shots, he was subdued by security. No one was hurt. He apparently mistook Mikoyan's car for Stalin's. Versions of his motive include personal grievance or mental illness. November 1943, a group of German paratroopers was supposedly neutralized, allegedly planning to eliminate the leaders of Britain, the USSR, and the USA at the Tehran Conference. However, this version is now widely considered disinformation fabricated by Stalin with Roosevelt's agreement, giving the US president a pretext to stay at the Soviet embassy rather than the American one and conduct certain negotiations without Churchill. Spring 1944. Soviet Smersh counterintelligence detained 2 German agents equipped with a portable flechette-firing weapon, intending to blow up Stalin's car on his way to the dacha. The operation was prepared by the Zeppelin sabotage branch of RSHA Department 4, using Soviet prisoner of war Pyotr Ivanovich Shiloh, German alias Tavrin. He was given multiple sets of Soviet documents, the primary one identifying him as the head of Smersh for the 39th Army, with the rank of major. To explain his presence in Moscow, his cover story involved convalescent leave following wounds. Experienced German surgeons even performed cosmetic surgery to simulate healed wounds. He was equipped with Soviet decorations, including the Order of Lenin and the Gold Star Medal. Propaganda inserts were placed in copies of Pravda and Izvestia, featuring fabricated accounts of the heroic Major Tavrin. Stalin's death was intended as the signal for a large airborne landing on the outskirts of Moscow that would seize a demoralized Kremlin and install a Russian cabinet headed by General Vlasov. It did not come to pass. Many versions attempt to explain certain unusual circumstances surrounding Stalin's death, often suggesting that someone in his inner circle helped him die. What is definitively known is that when Stalin lost consciousness on 1 March 1953, his guards did not come to his aid for many hours. Doctors were also summoned with significant delay as the guards sought authorization from members of the Presidium of the Central Committee. Despite the worldwide reputation of Stalin's protection service, it ultimately failed in its primary mission. The protected person died. The circumstances are debated, but many researchers and experts believe that had Vlasic continued to lead Stalin's security service, the leader's death could have been prevented, and the service would have gone down in history as one that never allowed an attempt on or the death of its charge. Whatever the case, Stalin was not paranoid. All these security measures were justified over the course of many years. Far too many people in the world wanted him physically eliminated and to decapitate a Soviet leadership that in critical moments held together through his commanding presence and iron nerve.